Behind every YouTube channel is a story, and in many cases a passion for something which led to the creation of that channel. For me it was my passion for Battlefield and the need to explain what was going wrong with the netcode in Battlefield 4. So if you like the videos that I release here, then you have to thank the Battlefield franchise, because without it I would not have created this channel. For the first year all my videos were about Battlefield. I tested the netcode and the updates that DICE LA worked on in the community test environment, and I made many videos where I shared design concepts which aimed to improve the gameplay experience. If you are interested, then you can find links to these concepts in the description. When DICE announced that they will not release any additional chapters for Battlefield 5, many of you asked if I could do a video about the current state of the Battlefield franchise, what I think went wrong with Battlefield 5, and what I hope to get from the next Battlefield. My initial response was that I don't want to do it, because to me it felt like I had done that video too many times in the past 6 years. And while some of the Battlefield games that were released since then did sound promising at first, not even one came close to provide what I expect from a Battlefield game. But on June 21st I changed my mind, because the game which made me fall in love with the Battlefield franchise, the game which I frequently went back to when I created a new design concept, the game which I consider to be the best Battlefield game that has been released to date, turned 15. And that game is Battlefield 2.
Welcome to duty.
Now, before you close the video, please hear me out, because I think that by the end of this video you will at least agree with me that EA and DICE must rethink their strategy for future titles to restore the reputation of the franchise and have players trust them again with their money. Or maybe more importantly, to even care about the next game and believe what they promise to deliver. So I will only talk about the core Battlefield franchise today, not about Bad Company, which I consider to be its own thing. And I'm still very upset about how EA discontinued that franchise instead of having it run alongside the main Battlefield franchise. Because by doing so, EA could have had each of these franchises provide very different and focused gameplay experiences, and so target very different audiences at the same time. Now, unlike the Frostbite engine-based games, Battlefield 2 did not blow players away with its graphics, nor its sound design. It crashed, it had glitches that could be exploited, and there were hackers. It had problems just like every other game. When I look back at Battlefield 2, I see all the flaws, the issues, and the by today's standards poor gunplay, clunky mechanics, and dated graphics. So why do I consider this to be the best Battlefield game of all time when I'm not looking through rose-colored glasses? And why do I think that DICE and EA can learn a lot from looking back at Battlefield 2? First of all, the art department, or better said the graphics, did not take priority over game design. Because of that, the game was very easy to read at all times. The HUD was not cluttered with icons or triangles. You could visually distinguish between friend and foe, which was very important as friendly fire was enabled per default. You could also find out which class a player had just by looking at his player model. And even though maps did provide cover, you could still visually identify enemies just by looking at them. They did not disappear into the background. The same cannot be said about any of the recent Frostbite engine Battlefield games. The quite ugly fog in Battlefield 2 was also a deliberate choice, as it concealed player movement and so increased the tactical depth of the game. How much of an impact this had on the flow of the game became obvious in Battlefield 3, where the remake of the classic Battlefield 2 maps Strike at Karkand, Sharkey Peninsula and Gulf of Oman didn't have that thick fog. As a result, these maps were infested with snipers. Enemy players were drawn towards your main base because they could now see you from very far away, and players were left with next to no tactical options and died on their way to an objective as nothing concealed their movement. Sure, the fog in Battlefield 2 wasn't great to look at, but it did serve a purpose and greatly enriched the gameplay experience. Speaking of maps, all Battlefield 2 maps came in 3 different sizes: a 16, 32 and 64 player layout. That ensured that maps did not feel overcrowded no matter how many slots the server had. The design of the maps was very diverse. There were maps that were flat, others had great variation in elevation. Some maps were set in cities, others had wide open areas. I don't want to dive too deep into the design of the maps, but they all followed the core design principle that they must give players a ton of tactical options and that flags must have value to provide players with an incentive to attack or go back and defend them, which was a big factor that contributed to the great online experience on public servers. In terms of game modes, Battlefield 2 featured Conquest, where the main bases of both teams could not be captured, Conquest Assault, where one team could lose its main base, and Conquest Double Assault, where both teams could lose their main base. There was also an infantry-only switch, which was pretty nice for esports. Now, I'm not saying that future Battlefield games should only have Conquest, but especially with Battlefield 4 we've seen that you can add too many game modes to a game, as many of them died off very quickly because they were either not very interesting, limited to a paid DLC, or only available on a few maps which were not very good. So unless you have the resources to do a game mode justice, which means to design maps specifically for that game mode and not shoehorn them into an existing map, your time is better spent working on something else that players do benefit from, and not just cram yet another half-baked game mode into the game just so that marketing can check another box. So Battlefield 2 had bugs, patches broke the game, and there were hackers. But you never saw the community implode or get consumed with negativity and hate for the developers. Instead, the Battlefield franchise had one of the most active, fast-growing, friendly and productive communities I've ever seen. And that was in many ways down to mod support, community-hosted servers, and the server-side battle recorder, which allowed players to create stunning machinimas and competitive players to analyze matches as well as settle a dispute. Back in the day, I was one of many news editors for one of the largest German Battlefield communities, and we simply couldn't keep up with what the community was up to. Every day modders showed something new and exciting. New community maps were released, tools were created that helped admins, modders and gamers. Machinimas were released or shootings organized. New clans and communities formed all the time and organized friendly battles called wars. Esports was a thing too. The community created so much positive content to talk about that the issues the game suffered from could not bring down the positive mood inside the community. While there were of course a few bad apples and tension between certain clans and communities, the community as a whole was without a doubt one of the best things about the franchise. For players it was extremely easy to find other like-minded players to enjoy the game with, and thanks to mods the game never got boring. You want to play a pirate? There's a mod for that. You want a true sandbox to build stuff? There's a mod for that. You want a racing game where cars are armed with guns? There's a mod for that. You want to turn Battlefield 2 into a full-blown military simulation? There still is the Project Reality mod for that. Features like mod support, server-side demo recording and community-hosted servers enabled the community to flourish and grow into something spectacular. Then there's the game design. Unlike the Frostbite engine games, Battlefield 2 was a very focused game. It did not try to be all things to all people. DICE knew exactly who their target audience was, and they went after it. Seriously, I cannot name a single feature in Battlefield 2 which feels out of place or like it was added just to tick a checkbox, or was enforced by marketing so that they can have it in their trailer. I cannot say the same about any of the Frostbite engine-based Battlefield games, where especially with Battlefield 5 there seems to have been a major disconnect between marketing and development, as well as marketing heavily influencing at least some aspects of the game. With Battlefield 2, DICE aimed at a very specific kind of gamer, and they did not try to attract players which were incompatible with what they had in mind for the online experience on public servers. These days it seems like DICE has no clear vision, or opinion on what the online experience should be like. All you hear is that it is a sandbox. Marketing, on the other hand, seems to have a very good idea about what the online experience must be like, which they show us in form of over-the-top Battlefield moments. We also did silly, stupid and crazy stuff in Battlefield 2. But players knew what to expect from the game and how it was meant to be played, because marketing did not portray the game as something it was not. DICE also wasn't shy to educate players about what their vision for the game was, and even enforced rules of engagement, which banned server configs like knife and pistol only, stat boosting, cheats, and game exploits, among many other things. DICE also initiated the Battlefield 2 Ranked Server Admin program, which dealt with admins and players who broke the rules of engagement. Punishments ranged from a stats reset for players to losing your ranked server for admins. So players knew that Battlefield 2 was designed to reward you for playing smart, sticking with your squad, having a good class composition, playing the objective, and investing time to get good at more than just aiming, which was especially true for jets and helicopters where not to crash when you land was already a big challenge. Here the so-called single player, where you could play with bots, was great to practice before you even dared to pilot a helicopter on a public server. Today you see players who were not around 15 years ago claim that Battlefield 2 was a military simulation. While DICE struck a balance between simulation and arcade shooter, which meant that the pace of Battlefield 2 was indeed slower than the frenetic experience with running and sliding you get in Battlefield 5, the notion that Battlefield 2 was a slow military simulation only played by old people couldn't be further from the truth. With 25 years I was one of the older players back then. Many players, modders, level designers, machinima directors, clan leaders and esports players were much younger. That said, many of the young players I knew back then were some of the best players I ever had the pleasure to play with. When I say best, I mean teamwork oriented, tactical, friendly, passionate, and they looked out for others inside and outside the game. These days many people like to paint young players as immature and the reason why the online experience in the Frostbite engine games deteriorated so badly. I say that this is not true. It all depends on who your target audience is. If the design of your game and marketing aim to attract all kinds of gamers, then don't act surprised when you have players complain about a lack of playing the objective, no teamwork and very unbalanced matches on public servers. Without a clear vision, strong leadership and truthful marketing, you will end up with a messy online experience. Figure out what kind of game you want to make and whom you want to make it for. Then design the game accordingly and make sure that marketing does not actively sabotage your efforts by trying to attract players outside your target audience. I think that EA and DICE can learn a lot from Battlefield 2. They should look at the decisions they made since then, where these decisions have led them, and then figure out if they want to continue on this path, or if it's time to make the next game a very focused experience again, which fulfills the needs of a smaller, very specific kind of audience, and so creates a loyal, happy fanbase in the process, which does not break out the pitchforks all the time. But if they decide to keep the blinders on and march straight ahead trying to just sell as many units as possible, then all I can say is that I'm very grateful that I had the privilege to play Battlefield 2 back in the day. Thanks to this game I had the opportunity to be part of an awesome community, to learn more about how games are built thanks to its mod support, to learn more about video editing and the production of tutorials as well as machinimas thanks to the battle recorder. And I'm very grateful for the many awesome people I met and had a blast playing the game with, which provided everything I was looking for and more. I know that these days very few people expect to find this kind of content on my channel, as I've moved away from covering the Battlefield franchise. But as I said, many of you asked for my opinion and I still care about the franchise because of how big of an impact Battlefield 2 had on me. So I thought that sharing my perspective as someone who's been with this franchise for so many years might be of interest to those who were underwhelmed or even disappointed by the recent Battlefield games. And that's all for today. Big shout out to my patrons for their awesome support and stay tuned for my usual content which will hit my channel soon. If you enjoyed this video then please give it a like, subscribe for more, ring the bell to get notified when I upload my next video, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris and this was Battle Nonsense.